Most companies fail because they're too soon, not because their idea was wrong. And it's a really important thing to remember, which is, visionary entrepreneurs see a future that other people don't see and try to create it. You can be decades too soon, and then that may be a waste of time. But if you're within the zone of possible, keep going. Bend the will of the market to your opportunity.
You've got quite the entrepreneurial spirit. Where did you get that from? Just sort of curious as an opening question. Incredible history.
I really have been lucky. I think just from as a young kid, the culture of the family I grew up in and the community of people I was around was about inquisition and questions and asking why and seeking, if you weren't satisfied with something, trying to make it better or different. And that across all areas, whether that was businesses or improvements or culture or social or justice, just the idea that we're on the planet for a short amount of time, we should make as much impact as we possibly can is sort of, I think, probably the genesis of my entrepreneurial spirit. And then, most principally, my grandparents were entrepreneurs and sort of have grown up in a immigrant family I was second generation, third generation, so didn't have any of the challenges of first generation, had all the benefits of the hard work of the people who came before me, generations before me, and really took to heart how important it is that you be a builder. And so my whole life I've been a builder. And, Lee, it's sort of funny, in some fundamental way, I'm unemployable. I really like working in teams of people trying to make the world better for other entrepreneurs. That's really been the thing that's been the animating principle of all my professional experiences, has been building platforms or companies that help other people achieve their dreams. And so that's a bit about, what motivates me.
Yeah, I love that. Often the second and especially third generation sort of destroys what was created first generation. How did you keep that going?
Yeah, I'm a bit rebellious. I may look like I have gray hair and I've mellowed, but I'm a restless spirit and restless about wanting. I really value time, and in a funny way, we're on the planet for such a short amount of time. We should make the most of every day and every minute and every interaction. And to me, entrepreneurship and company building was a way to do that. When I was a young kid, I thought I'd be an artist or a creative person. I'd be a writer or a painter or something. I was neither particularly good at either of those things, but channeled that kind of creativity into company building or company creation or transformation of companies, and found a tremendous and continue to find, honestly, a lot of personal gratification from unlocking value for other people, and that really is motivating for me.
Yeah, you and I are pretty aligned in that area, that's for sure. To kind of lay the foundation or describe for the listeners the problem that Payoneer is solving for and the value that it is actually creating in the world.
Yeah, so Payoneer is a really extraordinary company. This is our 20th year. So I joined Payoneer and I stand on the shoulders of the giants who built the company. And it's really important that, entrepreneurship can be from 0 to 1, from nothing to an idea, or entrepreneurship can be a 3,000 employee company, in 190 countries with 2 million active customers. That's what I do. But I find it as challenging and entrepreneurial as, starting at 0. What we solve is a very discrete problem. Small business owners and entrepreneurs around the globe, actually, from day one, generally, they are global businesses. They sell to multiple countries or they source from multiple countries. So if you're an entrepreneur in Vietnam or in Turkey or in Argentina, there isn't really enough demand in your home country to sort of get where you want to go or build what you want to build. And that's different than the United States, right? Here in the US, you can travel between Philadelphia and New York and DC and build an extraordinary business and never have a passport. But in most of the world, particularly in emerging markets, cross-border trade is really the essence of entrepreneurship. And so the problem Payoneer solves is local banks in the emerging markets don't provide the capability for an entrepreneur to hold multiple currencies, getting paid in dollars or yen or euro or what have you, or make payments in multiple currencies. So we really operate as a multi-currency financial stack of tools that businesses use to manage their international financial operations. And that may sound a bit esoteric, but it's not to the person who runs a business process outsourcer in the Philippines, whose customers are in the United States and Germany, and contractors are in the Philippines and across Asia. Or it's not esoteric to the wood table manufacturer in Vietnam who's exporting tables on Walmart.com and Amazon.com and eBay.com, but wants and needs to get paid in dollars and is buying advertising on Facebook and Google also in dollars. And we provide the financial infrastructure to solve that sort of complex problem with a network of regulated. We're regulated around the globe, so we're a regulated financial institution with a network of over 100 bank relationships, with on-the-ground salespeople and customer service managers in the local markets around the globe, on the ground in Lahore, Pakistan, on the ground in Ho Chi Minh City, on the ground in Buenos Aires, providing local support to cross-border entrepreneurs. And our marketing people like to say this, and I think it really is true. We are in some ways, the superconductor between someone's ambition and their achievement. They have this ambition to participate in global trade, and we're providing the financial tools that make it possible for them to do that.
Yeah, I would guess for most small, medium-sized businesses, thinking about exchange rates in multiple countries is overwhelming for them. So you're making this super easy, as I get it. And how does that work for them, where they do a transaction as just sort of a real-time exchange rate and it happens?
Yeah, I mean, first they have to actually send an invoice to their customer and say, hey, pay me. And we make that easy and simple for them to do, or easy for them to pay a vendor who they're working with, or pay a contractor or an employee. If you're based in Hong Kong, but you have employees in 4 countries around the world, navigating just paying your people is not easy to do. And Payoneer makes that simple. In terms of how the machine works, you should just think of it as simple as your and my banking relationships here in the United States. The magic happens under the covers. You just can log in and see your account statement and say, oh, I got paid, or I'm due to get paid, and I have these invoices to pay, or I want to use a Payoneer credit card and manage I have employees going on business trips, so I need to set limits on their cards so they don't get out of hand. All of that capability we're providing our customers.
That's incredible. Are the large banks chasing the same solutions?
It's actually interesting. Our partners are the large banks, because the large banks, I think, acknowledge, and certainly the big multinational banks, HSBC or Standard Chartered or Citibank, et cetera, are extraordinary companies, right? And they are expert at serving large multinational companies, but they're not really focused on the $30 million business process outsourcer in Manila, or the software developer who's in Poland, who's got 25 developers and they're doing contract software development, or the individual freelancer in Brazil who lives in Brazil and is happy and makes $50,000 a year doing work for Amazon or Google or someone in the Pacific Northwest, and needs to have a multi-currency account to get paid into. And so the banks are actually our friends and our partners. And the local banks in those countries are also, because we have capability and technology that they don't have. And so, the global supply chain of money, there's 3 big global supply chains: data and information, physical goods, and money. We play in all of them to some degree, but basically in the global supply chain of money, and are partners with all the other actors in that supply chain.
Yeah, so you're helping the big banks have much greater reach where they don't have access.
Yeah, and the customers that they maybe don't serve have access in a way that they would like to.
Yeah, I love that. So I was looking it up because I sort of forgot, but there's roughly 400 million small, medium-sized businesses in the world, 95% of all the firms when you add it up, and somewhere well north of 60% of total payroll. I've always thought of or employees. I've always thought of international business as sort of this great force for good and leveling factor, and it can inhibit global skirmishes because they don't want to blow up their economies and all that. And I haven't done anything that has done business in 190 countries, but one of my companies, we had 2,000 customers in 60 countries in the aerospace aftermarket business, and it was never a level playing field in any one of those countries. How do you think about leveling the playing field? Like, you've taken a giant step in that direction around the payments and invoicing, and as I understand now, I'm getting into HR. But how do you think about leveling the playing field? Because I think best value should win, and that creates the most value, collectively. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's important. You know, brilliance is evenly distributed, but opportunity is not, is sort of what I was thinking when you were talking. And I'm humble about what our role is, right? Our role is pretty discreet, which is provide a simple, fair, and trusted financial operating system for the world's cross-border SMBs. And if we do that in an excellent way, which we strive to every day, then maybe we save one of our customers an hour or 2 hours or 20 minutes or 10 seconds a day to focus on their customers, their value prop, their work. And, you know this well as an entrepreneur like I do. The biggest enemy to entrepreneurship isn't initiative or ideas, it's time. And managing your time to focus on value creation. And so the leveler that I think of is, can we do our part seamlessly, quietly, effectively, in a trusted way so our customers have the time they need to pursue what they want? I do think the networks that exist in our business are fascinating, right? A quick story: a woman who's a customer of ours, who's based in the United States, in Texas, I believe. She used to be an office manager of a dental office in maybe it was Dallas, I think. And the doctor she worked for said, I want you to cut the cost, be more efficient. Can you do the billing and invoicing outside the US? She said, sure. And she found people in Colombia to do that. And she built a model where they were doing that work from Colombia. And she realized, actually, I don't need to work for one dentist to do this. And she now has 500 dentists across the Southeast she provides an outsourced billing and, insurance management product that she does with independent contractors across Latin America. And she uses Payoneer to invoice her dental offices and uses Payoneer to pay those contractors, who then have Payoneer accounts and Payoneer credit cards to manage their local expenses. And without her ingenuity, those dental offices probably wouldn't be as efficient as they could be or profitable. And without her ingenuity, those folks in Latin America wouldn't be employed and raising their standard of living and having the opportunity. And our tool is one of the pieces of glue that makes that possible. And, I don't know if it quite levels the playing field, but it does. Back to the thing we started talking about entrepreneurship is how you sort of lift yourself up out of hard work and ingenuity and luck to capture the opportunities you want for your life. And everybody in that story is doing just that. And I find that extraordinarily motivating.
Yeah, I think it's incredible. Well, it does level the playing field on a transactional basis, makes it easy, super easy exchange. I think you've described it as it's like they're next door. You're doing business with them regardless of where they're at in the world. So I think that's fantastic. How does your business model work and the fee structure around that?
Yeah, ours is pretty straightforward. We have an ad valorem model where money flows into Payoneer accounts largely for free, and we charge a fee when money's used. If it's used on a card, it's different than if it's withdrawn to someone's bank. But we are, um, effectively 1% on average, take rate, a little bit more greater than that for small businesses around the world. And it's a lot of value we're providing to people who otherwise don't have a good alternative, or the competitive alternatives are slow and much more expensive. And we aren't the cheapest guy in town, but we are very focused on providing more value than we charge. And that's, we've had I don't know, 18% compounded growth per quarter for the last 8 quarters. And last year was 20% revenue growth. Like, our momentum is because we have a product that business owners need in parts of the world where we go. We do a great job. We provide the KYC and anti-money laundering and all the protections that a regulated financial institution needs to provide, and do it at a fair price for the customer who needs the service.
Yeah. When I look at other payment processors like Stripe, so your fees are lower than that. And if you're not the cheapest, it sounds like with all the bundled services, you probably are the cheapest because they would pay a lot more to deal with those other things.
Yeah, it is as you'd expect, an internal conversation frequently in our price. We've have a sort of a never-ending set of pricing initiatives underway that have proven to have very little or no adverse effect on our customers, which has been eye-opening here, which is if you provide a good product, you can charge fairly for it. And we're doing that and getting better and more bespoke about it.
Yeah. So a little bit on business model. I'm big on let's get every leader in every organization appropriately for their role they play, the value they're designed to create, understanding the business model and how they can impact it. Most companies, when I go in, the leaders don't really understand it. Even at the top, they don't have a clear way of looking at that. My guess is this is a big deal to you, is to making sure everybody gets that. Talk through that and how you do it and why it's important.
Yeah, when I took the role of CEO, we had just experienced 5% revenue growth, and the core business was unprofitable. 2 years later, we were 20% revenue growth business and profitable in our core business. And our transformation has really three core pillars. One is clarity of vision and purpose. Like, we've made very clear around the world exactly what we're doing, why we're doing it, why it matters, and how we're going to do it. Um, we publish the information. I'm a big believer in transparency, and so there's monthly OKR reports, there's monthly town halls, there's visits to the regions and sitting with our customers. We're trying to push our organization to be more and more, in fact, localized. The next is, we be our customers' advocate inside of Payoneer. The idea that every one of our colleagues' job it is to do everything we can to help our customers achieve what they're trying to do. And that's a mindset shift, which is not, it's a privilege to use our service. It's a privilege of us to serve you, and trying to get that understood in our organization. And then, people build great companies, and having the right people with the right mindset for what we endeavor to do at Payoneer was really important, right? Joining Payoneer was a transformation, sort of the beginning of what I think of as the second curve of our growth, where we actually had extraordinary success up and through COVID, but post-COVID had to, take a deep breath and figure out where the big opportunity was going to be. That's when I entered the firm and redefined what success would be, redefined our values, and redefined sort of the KPIs we wanted to manage to, and then recruited a group of leaders that had the scar tissue from past transformations, had the maturity and frustration tolerance, to come in and be brave and bold, because we're not a company of looking for incrementalism or, single digit share gains. We see a big global opportunity. We find ourselves well positioned, and I'm trying to build a leadership team of executives that are, mid-career ass kickers, pardon my language, who are here to put a stamp on the world. And, I was in China 2 weeks ago, and our CFO and B. Ordonez, who runs finance as well as operations, it's a huge remit, talked at a town hall about her family having grown up in Spain and then immigrating to Great Britain, and the importance of financial opportunity for people who maybe didn't have it. And I've looked for executives who are great at their jobs, but also fit the profile of somebody who takes this personally because helping unlock opportunity for people you may never meet is not just about the P&L. It's about something deeper and deeper meaning in what you're building. Because like I said a few minutes ago, we're only here a short amount of time. We should build things that are great, that help other people achieve their dreams. So I've looked for people who can do just that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So, thinking about turning around a business, and as you're talking, I'm kind of stepping back and looking at all these businesses that are just sort of running along with 1 to 5% growth a year, sort of mediocre returns. Why do they get so comfortable? So there's that part of the question. And then I think it's whether it's a turnaround or going in to get something really moving. How do you think about starting? Like, why does this happen? And where do you start, or how do you think about starting for our listeners? Because we do have a lot of listeners that are running organizations.
I think you have to tell yourself the truth. If you go back to the book we all both read probably 25 years ago and look at Good to Great, right? You got to have the right people on the bus, and they have to confront the brutal facts of your business. And I think maybe as people get into middle age, they get better and better at lying to themselves about themselves or their companies or what they have. And I think with age comes some degree of wisdom and perspective. And this is when executives should really be asking the tough questions about first principle type questions. Why are we here? Why do we make that decision? And is that still relevant to the opportunity? And there's a restlessness and a curiosity that the best entrepreneurs have. And that is, you can't fake that, right? Like, you can't fake it on a summer Friday, the person who, logs off and disappears versus the person who says, actually, I'm interested in solving the problem. I'm interested in creating the value. So I'm going to work to do it. I'm not a believer in work-life balance. I think that's actually a false idea. It's sort of a poor idea that actually we have life. And if you just have life, the company you choose to work for should be one you believe in and care about and love the people you get to do it with. The colleagues, you don't have to go to the movies every Saturday night with them and pretend to be best friends. You have to actually value and respect them, and they should value and respect you. And then together say, let's do something great. Let's actually ask tough questions and, create an environment that's safe so people feel trusted and respected, but also challenging. And our team at Payoneer feels like we're not perfect, but you can feel this kind of institutional momentum happening and belief. And that's when it becomes life and not work.
Yeah. I've always thought of it as one big blended life. And sometimes you spend more time here, more there. You've got all these priorities going on. So that concept never made sense to me either. And then this notion that the older folks get, that they start to back off a little bit. I'm getting older, I'm backing off. I think we can be way more effective going forward. It sounds like you're saying the same thing. And I also look at it sort of like taking our brain to the gym every day. And how do we get more and more comfortable being more and more uncomfortable and totally great in that space? So there's something interesting there. What's your advice for those that, hey, I'm getting older and I should probably back off a little bit? I don't know if you knew this before coming into this interview, but one of my business partners in my current consulting firm, ETW, was Jack Welch before he passed away. And he didn't let up for a second. He went harder all the way to the end.
I'm humble about giving advice to other people whose circumstances I don't know. I can just tell you how I think about it for me. I like picture my kids' faces all the time when I'm working on something, and I think, would they be proud or learn from the way I make decisions? Would they actually say, "Oh, facing a challenge, like he charged head on into it. He used all the available data. He treated people with respect and held them to a high standard." Because it is true, I'm demanding as a human, most on myself than anybody else. So the advice I give to people is, if you're burnt out, admit it, acknowledge it, and fix it. And if you're complacent, get yourself uncomfortable. I agree with you on this idea of wisdom as we mature, right, that I'm a better executive by 100x than I was a decade ago, and probably 1,000x than I was 2 decades ago. And 2 decades ago, I was full of opinions and even some successes, right? 2 decades ago, I was running Ford models, and I had helped create and work on the team that built Arizona Iced Tea and helped the guys that were launching Starbucks across the East Coast of the United States, but I didn't know anything. And so like if someone's listening that's in their 50s, I would say, at least I feel like I'm just getting started.
Yeah, I don't even think I'm 10% of the value I can create in the world. And yet I'm 3 times as effective as I was 2 years ago. And it
Yeah.
just every 2 years I leapfrog like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Um, so if a company, and I think of all for-profit businesses as sort of these value creation machines, really even nonprofit government should all look
Of
at
course.
themselves that way, in my view. Setting the goal, like getting everybody aligned around the goal. I mean, you talked about vision as one of the 3 things. What's your best advice for setting that? And I often start with, because I run a number of CEO mastermind groups with a format I designed. How do we work backwards from 3x the value of what the company is today? And what a great place to kind of start and go. But how do you think about that?
It's interesting because we are, and this is something that a recent addition to our board is Barack Alum, who had been the CEO of NICE, which is a really extraordinary software business. And he and I really connected on this notion that companies transform every 18 months. That actually, that there's you have a customer you're trying to serve, you have a thesis about how you're going to serve them, but that, you know, I don't think I'd be the right person to work at Pfizer inventing drugs that you lose money on for 20 years and then the drug happens. I think I'd be too restless there. We are hell bent on helping cross-border entrepreneurs do what they need to do. And every day we get a little bit smarter about that, and the market changes a bit, and the external forces change. So I think in 5 years we know what we'd like to do, but I don't make 5-year plans. We make sort of rolling plans that we keep updating based on data that we gather about what we've achieved. And to me, that keeps the metabolism cooking, because you're constantly, you know, setting a goal, achieving or missing, learning from it, and adjusting. And that sort of agility feels, stimulating.
Yeah. I remember the early days in some of my companies, we would shoot for this business and we would get a little bit more, but it was over here and only about 20% of what we were shooting for. And over time, we got better at predicting what was happening there. And I've heard a number of folks say, hey, I'm the right CEO to get us from here to there, but not the next step, or not the next step going through. And I'm a fan of be the CEO your company needs you to be right now, today, whatever that is. Stop making excuses for it. Um, I don't know that there's a real limit there other than just mindset. Because you've done it all. You've done startup all the way through something very big right now, and you want to be significantly bigger. And everybody's winning as you're doing this. That's what I love about how you talk about this in your business model. What are your thoughts there on these hard absolutes about you can only
Yeah.
do this or that?
So when I took this job, I had never been a payments company CEO, never been a public company CEO, hadn't run a regulated institution before, didn't have the experience of employees in 50 countries. And, we have third of our revenues in China. Ukraine was one of our top countries, and the company has a significant development center in Israel. So we faced an enormous set of challenges, and that list of things I had never done before was actually the reason I jumped in, because the 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 company needed somebody and a team that was going to take a fresh look at the assets of the business, look at the competitive landscape through, fresh eyes, with maybe some naive optimism that anything's possible, that brings energy and creativity to a business. And that the I would encourage any leader to push themselves and surround yourself with people that are smarter than you, better than you, more capable than you, but also who don't sort of bring you down. Because the burden of leadership is enormous, as you know better than anyone. Um, Downers make it harder. What you need is solution-minded people where we can look at scenarios and what data, and take the data and model new solutions out of that. And that's what we've done. And I think that works. So the complacency is the enemy of success, really. And someone asked me the other day, how do I feel about all the uncertainty in the market today? Right? The world is changing in real time across a lot of different ways. And I feel like it is, Winston Churchill talked about how much, in that moment, there's lots of opportunity. There's really only one alternative, which is charge ahead. Charge ahead. And like the best companies, you don't have all the information, but still charge ahead. And I think leading from the front is probably the most important thing execs could be doing right now.
Yeah, and what I love about this, something I mentioned earlier, with you, myself, and the businesses that I'm operating, and tens of millions of other companies working diligently to keep the global marketplace going to build the value in their businesses. It's a deterrent to a lot of issues. I mean, it wants to prevent wars, skirmishes, and things along those lines. So I still see it as such a giant force for good. And you're dealing with more than most when you look at those different regions you mentioned. That's
What's fascinating is when you meet an entrepreneur in Shanghai or Turkey or Vietnam, any of the places I've traveled in the last couple of years, India, there's more in common in entrepreneurship because it's all about ambition, achievement, economics, community, legacy. Those ideas are universal. And I do think trade, and certainly cross-border trade, has an opportunity to continue to be a very important part of sharing of ideas, value. So, I am like you. I think more trade's a good thing.
yeah. And I found the same for families. There were a lot more similarities than differences when you look at the cultural differences around the world. They want to be healthy, happy, support their families, trade their best efforts for the accumulated best efforts of others. All that in there. And I found that to be universal. And as long as I came at every relationship that way, it just worked. It worked literally everywhere.
Yep.
With everything you've done, you have failed a lot, like every entrepreneur does. How do you think about failure, and how do you leverage it?
Yeah, I wear my heart on my sleeve. So like, I'm somebody who takes the shots and everybody knows when I'm taking the shots. So there isn't a fake persona version of me. It like when I screw something up, people tell me I take it to heart. I've had plenty of missteps. But I'm a volume cures everything person, which is if you only take one shot and you miss, you're stuck. Take 1,000, you make a third of them, you're a hero. So, I try to take a lot of shots. I have an incredible personal support system. Which as I've gotten older, I realize is actually probably the reason for the professional resilience is to know you can fail professionally but still succeed as a human. When entrepreneurs put a lot of their identity into what they're building, and struggles are part of that. And it goes back to my comment about my kids, right? Like you want to teach that you can get punched in the nose and get right back up and keep going. And that, is I've had that support.
Yeah. A pretty big majority of adults don't like to admit they're wrong. It's really, really hard for them. Whenever I'm wrong, it's like, ooh, I really messed up there. We need to change this
Yeah.
quickly. And I think my biggest mistake in business, I wrote off 27 million bucks. Okay, that didn't work. Let's move on. How do we leverage that to do better even in the future?
Yeah. You try to win more than you lose, but you can't just win. And I think that may be one of the reasons why, mid-career execs get more and more conservative because they think, hey, I've stacked up some wins. I don't want any losses. that actually gets in the way of breakthrough growth.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Well, how do you create an intentional culture that cultivates what we're talking about here and all the other things that cause the most value to be created?
We are super transparent about it. We talk about it. We have ice cream parties. If you screw something up, you're supposed to buy everybody in the company or in your office ice cream. And you basically bring ice cream sandwiches. Everyone gets together. You say, hey, I messed this up. Eat an ice cream. People laugh and then go back to their desk, and normalizing that, you're not a bad person if you make a mistake. And then, tequila shots or water shots or green juice shots, whatever somebody wants for successes, and celebrate both small victories and small failures. And I think that can normalize to some degree an idea that when we go to work, we're no less human than we were at home sitting on the couch, with the remote control in one hand and, whatever, eating snacks in the other. Like we're all putting our pants on one leg at a time. Like let's be brave professionally, and then create a you know a bit of a safety net around people so that they can do their best work. You know, and one thing that our organization's working a lot on is talent density. The idea that strong people like to work with strong people, and we've recruited and built an organization of kind, collaborative, well-intentioned people who are super capable, so that when someone is unkind or not collaborative or, screw something up, everybody knows like, hey, time out. That's not us. We do it this way. And that inevitably happens in every organization.
Yeah. Were there a few times or even one time where you left somebody in place too long that wasn't performing? Because I find that totally diminishes productive energy in a business.
Yeah, there's no question I've done that. And I'm a fiercely loyal person. I'm fiercely loyal because I think it's really important to work with people you know how to work with and know how to work with you. But there have definitely been times where we've stayed together too long, or someone's been in one role for too long. One of the things we're trying to do, I just recently moved our chief transformation officer, who had been my chief of staff, into our chief people officer job. And so, in the course of 3 years, he's gone through a number of different roles. And it's, I think, really important because it gives somebody a fresh challenge every time. So he's high performing in every job, but you want to keep giving people new challenges to tackle, as opposed to staying in one thing for too long.
Yeah, I love all of that. I heard you say in an interview, never give up. And I was thinking about a talk I gave not too long ago at a startup conference. And the title was why 90% plus of all startups fail and why 90%
Quit.
don't have to.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think I like, look, probably to my own financial peril, I have stuck at things longer than others people would. But I think you can never quit. Like you need to be the last person out of the ship, kind of thing. Like if you're gonna, which is why you have to be intellectually honest with yourself about the things you're doing. If you don't believe in it, you're certainly not going to work hard on it when it's not working. And so if you do believe in it, then, put on blinders and tune out the noise and keep going. I don't know if it was Reid Hoffman or somebody or someone like that, one of those sort of superstar entrepreneurs said, your entrepreneurship, or maybe it was Mark Andreessen. So Mark, you're basically, most companies fail because they're too soon, not because their idea was wrong. And like, it's a really important thing to remember, which is, like your visionary entrepreneurs see a future that other people don't see and try to create it. And you can be decades too soon, and then that, may be a waste of time. But if you're within the zone of possible, keep going and bend the will of, the market to your opportunity.
I've always found that a small number, maybe less than 15% of the entrepreneurs that are startup entrepreneurs are really passionate about solving a problem. And I like your point. If you're not passionate about something, how could you ever be good at it and put the time in? It's just not going to happen. And the rest of them seem more interested in playing startup. What does my pitch deck have to look like? How do I get a bunch of money? and no wonder they fail. And threading something you said earlier back into this, basically confront the brutal facts about your business. I believe there's always a way through if you're willing to pivot, iterate, reset, whatever it takes based on confronting those facts virtually almost 100% of the time, even if it doesn't look anything like the business you started.
Of course. I mean, at OpenSky, the business we sold to Alibaba, we pivoted 3 different times, remade the company, fully remade the company. And the core group of 15 of us stayed together. And at one point, we could have started a software business or created a hot dog vendor business. We were going to build together, and we were determined to do that. And yeah, there is the relentless curiosity of entrepreneurship requires honesty. Because if you really are in it for the pitch deck and the parties, you're gonna fail. So do something else.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's if we're here to create value, it doesn't matter what it is, and we go for it. And I do find a lot of founders that just say, "Well, we're not going to be that. We're only going to be this," and now they've almost ensured they're likely gonna fail going through that.
Yeah. Yeah.
One thing that's interesting, and I get to the pleasure of working with so many different businesses, marketing is changing a lot, and I'm kind of coming to this place where trusted relationship based marketing is the one thing that probably will be timeless because with AI and all the advances, there's so much noise out here. It's ridiculous these days. Where do you see it going of, companies marketing and being effective in the future?
It's such an interesting question because I've been wondering to myself, as someone who was a marketer by background, Starbucks, Arizona Iced Tea, About.com, these were all sort of marketing things I got to sort of help shape and build. It has definitely changed. And I even think the influencer model has changed, over the last, let's call it 36 months, where the proximity to influence, I think, is perhaps made people, more susceptible to marketing messages that maybe they shouldn't be. And so you know, I, I'm hopeful that that networks of trust come back, a little bit the way, maybe this is idealistic, but the folks who are coaching little league and their kids are on the team and say, "Hey, do you know an accountant?" And they say, "I use this guy, you should call him." The sort of the true relationship based connecting people to one another. I think that's important. And in a TikTok and Instagram world, we think we're connected to those people we follow, but really not so much. And I certainly in business to business marketing, we find that our customers are the greatest lead source for us because we provide a good product and their networks adopt our platform. And that's why our customer acquisition costs are super low because actually, it isn't traditional word of mouth like the baseball analogy, but it is connections to people you do business with and you trust. And I think that's important, particularly in an AI world, as you say, where identity is something that's, going to be interesting over time as AI gets so good at replicating people and creating customized messages.
Yeah. I don't know about the rest of the world, but I suspect they're moving in the same direction that I've moved. I almost don't believe anything I see or hear anymore. And I've had to develop a set of filters that I process the information through to say, does this make sense? Yes or no? And if
Right.
it's important, dig a whole lot deeper. How do you think about that when it comes to making decisions based on information that's super
Yeah, I've become
reliable?
super quantitative in my decision-making frameworks,
Okay.
you know, because it feels like everything else lies, but the numbers. So, you know, you know, uh, um,
Yeah.
but I think decision hierarchies and frameworks and risk frameworks are really the way to go, to get to the core decision and people and trust helping you find it.
Yeah. Are you using AI tools to help your business and
Yeah, we have a bunch of different applications. We have AI for our employees to use to make their jobs easier, in our customer care team. We have AI our engineers use to write code faster. We have AI in our top of funnel to help us identify high value customers and get them to the right uh, salesperson or account team. Um, and ultimately, we have so much data that we can use the AI. We are not doing this yet, but will, where we can actually use the AI to help create um, analysis for individual business owners about their financial operations, and then effectively create lookalike models. Businesses like yours do these kinds of things. Here's what you do. And that data, you know, the example I gave a couple of minutes ago about a business that's giving Payoneer cards to employees that are traveling, we've lots of companies doing that. We know what a business trip from the Manila to fill in the blank city in the world usually costs and how much competitive businesses spend on that. And we'll be able to help people understand their allocation of expense to make better decisions. Or, hey, my supply chain looks like X. What do other companies like mine do for their supply chain? And we might be able to give them some insights and opportunities from all the assembled data we have in our platform.
Yeah, I was curious to get your take on how you think AI is going to help the SME global, business exchange. And so, is this a new product for Payoneer?
We haven't productized this. It's still in the kitchen being cooked. But if you think about it, you're in India and you're selling services to people around the world, and you're competing or learning from businesses that are in other parts of the globe selling services, helping light up the world for people about where opportunity is. You know, financial institutions have a tremendous amount of data, and that data anonymized can be really valuable for businesses to learn from, right? It's, if you think about what Gartner Group does, Gartner Group tries to tell the world which companies are the right vendors to use. Well, when I look at the general ledger of our customers, I actually know what software they're using. So we can help recommend businesses like yours renew software contracts like these.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a pretty big play in helping small businesses understand the power of AI and how it can impact their business. This could be an incredibly valuable tool that you put together here. I hope you pursue it.
Yeah, this is like I said, it's in the kitchen, so it's not a 2025 P&L impact, but it is a hopefully you can tell by the way I'm talking about providing value to our customers. It isn't purely to help them move their money around the world. That's sort of the oxygen they need to breathe, but there's a lot more value we intend to provide.
Yeah, when you acquired an HR business, how are you thinking about stacking this going forward? And relating back to my aerospace company, what we started with, we found something synergistic, and what was maybe 3 or 4 things we did when I started the company, we had 10,000 different things we did 23 years later before I sold it. What are the
Yeah,
next steps for you? Yeah.
this was a sort of common sense one, right? Because if you just go talk to the customers and listen to them describe how they operate their business, we heard our customers describe, hey, I use Payoneer for 100% of my international accounts receivable when I'm getting paid, but I have HR expenses and regulatory issues with my contractors and employees that are 1,000 or 2,000 or 10,000 miles away. Can you help me with that? And we were providing some payment capability, but not yet the software capability. And, the number one OpEx item in our business is headcount. Most entrepreneurial companies, it's the headcount. And if you think about our job, it's to digitize the entire P&L of an SMB. Getting into the HR workforce management space was a no-brainer. And we're really excited about the early progress. We have cross-selling that product to our existing customers, and actually it being a front door in to businesses in the United States who didn't know Payoneer. We're not a household name here in the US the way we are in most markets around the globe. Businesses in the US coming to us and saying, you know what? I have contractors globally and employees globally, and I'm managing it on an Excel spreadsheet, and it's a nightmare. I can use the Payoneer workforce management products to do that, and that's opening up a whole new opportunity for us. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, that's amazing. In our conversation here, anything kind of standing out for you? I wrote down, brilliance pretty evenly distributed, but opportunity isn't. That really resonated when you said that. Anything kind of standing out for you?
I think talking for an hour about entrepreneurship is a healthy reminder that it's all about the people and the values and the sort of environment you create inside the organization, whether you're building a global financial payments organization like mine, or making widgets someplace in the world. It's important that you build an organization that has a soul and a set of values, and that when you miss, you confront it honestly and say, "Hey, I screwed that up. Let's fix it." And when you get it right, that you celebrate it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think most companies actually have a transactional relationship with employees. Here's your paycheck. Thanks for doing what you agreed to do. And they only do half of what they agreed to a lot of times. And what you're describing is how I've always felt about it. This is a developmental journey, a value creation journey. We're all on together, helping each other. And that feels so much better. And it kind of goes back to, I think, one of the biggest falls on the planet today is we're drifting away from healthy communities that have each other's backs. And you're actually building healthy communities between businesses, your team members, and all of it in there. And it was last year in May, I took over as interim CEO, and I'm still doing it for one of my clients. Changed the company name to Dinner Table, and it's all building communities of families raising kids to create value in the world. And we have about 37,000 parents in 10 months flat in our Dinner Table community
That's awesome.
in 67 different countries. Talk about the value of just strengthening community for our listeners. Yeah.
Yeah, this is it's an interesting thing because I think about it often, and then it feels, I think it's true. It's an incredible burden or responsibility for the executives who recognize that's what they're trying to do. And so I'm thoughtful about, sort of not drinking my own Kool-Aid about that a little bit, right? Some humility to say it's a company. People get paid and they get health insurance and they have challenges. And, we're not a family. We're not a family. We're a high performing sports team or whatever. And, I like the Netflix sort of, it's not a permanent opportunity. It's an opportunity while you're right to help contribute to it. But while you're here, our job is to treat you with respect, to provide a challenge that's deep and meaningful, and colleagues that are fun and smart and, great at what they do. And then in an unstable, unpredictable world, some clarity, right? This is what this community globally stands for. And when we were in Shanghai 10 days ago, or in Tel Aviv, a month before that, talking to the organization about what we stand for, what they can expect here is a deep sense of purpose to help other entrepreneurs turn their ambition into achievement, which is why we exist, and high expectations and lots of opportunity. And that isn't maybe enough, right? We are not building permanent, right? I don't think of it as permanent. I think of it as like, while we're all here, let's make substantial impact and make our neighbors' lives inside the organization better. And then when it's time to sort of raise your hand and say, I can't contribute more or deliver more, people self-select out and the next athlete steps into the role. And the community is a powerful one and a real one, but it's important that it's balanced with the outcome and the results. It's not a community regardless of the results.
Yeah. Yeah. As I said earlier, I think about companies as a value creation machine. We all should contribute to that. And community has to be appropriate. And I've thought for decades now that we need to create value in all three buckets. So material value creation, the value of the business has to keep increasing if we want to be super healthy, at least in my view. And then the emotional energy, positive emotional energy, to me is the scarcest commodity on the planet. So that's the X factor for leaders. They create this environment from which everybody creates value. Spend a ton of time there. And then the spiritual value creation bucket, just purely connectedness, all the programs to strengthen relationships between employees. And the reason the second two buckets matter so much in business to me is it just drives this productive engagement like so much higher than in a
Output. Just
company.
output. The results are so much stronger when people are respected. In our sort of value statement, we talk about being our customer's advocate, which I mentioned. We talk about do it, own it. Take initiative, take action. We talk about continuous improvement, never be complacent. And then finally, we talk about building one another up, right? Like the world's, knocks people down often, and, it's pretty tough. And as much as this can be a place where you are challenged, given opportunity, and built up, supported, that feels like a company I want to work for and work my tail off every day to try to, make better for our customers.
Yeah, that's fantastic. If our listeners want to connect with you, potentially learn more about what you're doing, where should they go, John?
I don't know. They can go to LinkedIn and friend me and message me on LinkedIn, or they can, connect to the Payoneer organization. We are easy to reach.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your time today. This was a great conversation, and it just makes me feel even more fulfilled and happy that there's CEOs like you in the world doing it the way you're doing it. So thank you so much, John.
That you're generous spirited to say that. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right. And this has been the Show Your Value podcast. If you got some value out of today's episode, please leave a review, and subscribe. And until next time, show your value to the world.